If you want to age well and prevent disease, one aspect of that no one really talks about is how to age well and prevent disease as a caregiver. There are many people today who are caregivers for loved ones, whether it's a spouse, a parent, or a family member. Aspects of being a caregiver that no one talks about, but we should. Because if we don't address these aspects, then it is very likely that as a caregiver, you can suffer as well. It is estimated that 30% of caregivers die before those that they're caring for. And there is a reason for that, right? The goal for this video is to bring to light aspects that are about being a caregiver, and by addressing them, they will hopefully help you improve your health as a caregiver, or if you know someone who's a caregiver, or if you are a caregiver in the future, you deserve to know these things. And through my own experiences too, I hope that you can help to avoid some of the mistakes that I made. This is part one. Okay, number one, let me grab something. Ambiguous loss. Ambiguous loss I read about in this book called Loss, Trauma, and Resilience by Dr. Pauline Boss. This changed my life, not to put it too strongly. So what is ambiguous loss? Ambiguous loss is a loss that has no end. That's what caregivers deal with. And she does a great job of going into that in detail. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that too. So when someone passes away, when someone dies, there's a funeral. There is a natural progression of grief and an accepted way to mourn. However, when there is an ambiguous loss, which is usually happening around people who need caregiving services, such as they've had a stroke and they are a different person. They've developed Alzheimer's disease or dementia. They've had a traumatic brain injury and they've lost function or mental capacity. Or if someone goes missing and there's no body and they don't know what happened to them. This follows the process of ambiguous loss. And the reason this can be so challenging is because there is no expected way to grieve. Ambiguous loss doesn't have a timeline. Problem with this from the aspect of a caregiver is that there will always be a need to take care of other people rather than your own emotional grief and well-being. And when you are a caregiver, you, rightfully so, prioritize someone else's well-being because they can't do things for themselves, right? Rather than focusing on your own grieving process. And if you don't focus on your own grieving process, in the end, that can actually negatively impact your health. I went through that as well. And one other thing that she talks about in here, and that few people talk about in regards to ambiguous loss and being a caregiver, is that we are exposed as caregivers to uncontrollable events. I'll give you an example. My father was admitted through the ER for a TIA. It's a mini stroke. He was perfectly fine. They were going to watch him 24 hours and be discharged the next day on blood thinners. While he was admitted overnight in the hospital, the very reason he was there was to prevent a full-blown stroke. And that is what happened overnight, and no one caught it. He had a full-blown ischemic stroke overnight in the hospital, and a series of events later, he's now unable to move the left side of his body, and it's an uncontrollable event, right? I would have loved to have been able to control what those healthcare professionals were doing, what that hospital was doing. However, I can't control what's happening in his life, and I tried to. And so as a caregiver, in order to manage the grief associated with this ambiguous loss, is we try to control things in our lives that we can't control. You too, if you have parents, if you have a loved one who's aging, watching our parents age, lose function, lose independence, we can't control that. So a lot of people try to take control. We live in a society that loves mastery, right? And so understanding ambiguous loss can transform how you approach these situations. And if you would like me to do a video dedicated to this or ambiguous loss, please comment below. I would gladly do that. I just don't know if people want to hear about it, but 10 out of 10 recommend looking into it. Okay, Number 2, the second thing about being a caregiver that no one really talks about is selling a home and packing up years of living. If you're in a situation right now where you're not having to do that in an emergent case, I recommend that you go through what you can to decrease what you own and make sure you know where you're going to put things if something were to happen. When my father had a stroke, my parents were living in the home that we grew up in, and I was 3 years old when we moved into that home. So it had like 30 years of living. And what we had to do, my dad could no longer enter that home. He was now wheelchair bound and couldn't move the left side of his body. We had to sell that home, figure out what to do with all this housing stuff. And that is so stressful. And so many people go through that as caregivers, whether it's inability to have someone live in that house anymore because they need a wheelchair, or if just have to downsize, or if you need to move closer to family. It is a huge undertaking, and selling a home is not easy. So making sure that you have the processes that involve to help you with that is very pivotal. The third thing that no one really talks about in regards to being a caregiver is learning proper positioning care. As you are a caregiver for someone, a lot of things that we take for granted as independent, healthy individuals is our ability to readjust how we sit, right? If you're sitting too long on your booty and you need to move, you can readjust yourself. People, such as in my dad's situation, don't have the ability to do that. And so proper positioning care is very, very important, especially with older people. Frailty of the skin integrity, they're more likely to create bed sores, things like that. So learning how to have proper positioning. This was a huge thing for me, even as a nurse, to learn from my dad, getting him in and out of bed. How are you going to get someone in and off of a bedside commode or a toilet? How are you going to get someone in and out of a car? Can they even get in and out of a car? How are you going to transport them to doctor's offices? It is a huge undertaking. And the more you can learn about that early on, the better. And this is yet another reason, as a caregiver or as someone who is independent at this moment in time, it is so important for you to focus on your mobility and your strength. If I'm injured, I'm unable to lift my father, and he needs help being lifted. And so my workouts are definitely focused around building strength to help me age well. But there's two sides to that. And the other side is also to make sure that I protect the integrity of my back and my core in order to be able to lift my father as he needs help and lift someone else if they need it. So learning proper positioning care is so important, and make sure that you focus on your health too. The fourth thing that no one really talks about in regards to being a caregiver is advocating during doctor's visits and hospital stays. This is probably one of the most shocking truths that you realize when you become a caregiver. As a nurse, I was shocked at the amount of advocating required for my father when he was in and out of the hospital. And then when my mom developed stage 4 cancer, she lasted 5 months after her diagnosis. But the amount of questioning was mind-blowing. Just 2 examples for you, and I'm sure you can relate to this if you're a caregiver. They were going to start chemotherapy on my mom. She was jaundiced, she was yellow, and if you didn't know, when someone's yellow and jaundiced, that means they have a high bilirubin more than likely. You know, babies become jaundiced, right? That yellow. And in adults, that's a sign of really compromised liver function. She looked like a little glowworm. She was so orange. And before they were going to start chemotherapy, they do blood work, right? And I said, are you going to check her bilirubin level? And they said no. So I asked them to, and as a result of them checking it, her bilirubin was so high, they realized it would have been lethal if they had started chemotherapy. And that's not me doing something special. That's just me asking questions. That's something that you as a caregiver have to do. They should have checked that bilirubin anyway. I should not have had to ask them to do that. She was presenting neon yellow. Obviously, her bilirubin was high. In my father's case, during COVID, he was admitted to the hospital. And while asking a nurse how he was doing, I said, how's the left side of his body? Because he can't move the left side of his body, right? So I'm very concerned about his integrity of the skin, all that good stuff. I want to make sure he's getting physical therapy. And she said, oh, he's fine on his left side. And I was like, and so I said, well, he had a stroke and can't move it. And she said, oh, I didn't know that. This was halfway through the 12-hour shift. That means she had already assessed my father, and she didn't know that he had left side paralysis. These are two small examples of what needs to happen for people who are advocating for loved ones in the hospital. It does not need to be that way, but it's unfortunate it is. If you're a caregiver, if you're physically capable, you are going to be doing a lot of advocating, but you have the power to transform someone's life by doing so. And so that's one thing people don't talk about, is the amount of advocating necessary for loved ones. And then the fifth thing that no one really talks about in regards to being a caregiver is celebrating during the victories and comforting during the valleys. As a caregiver, you are someone's support, physically and emotionally. And these journeys have ups and downs. And despite the loss that you are experiencing through watching someone suffer and potentially be encountering the end of their life and all of the grief that's associated with that, you are also expected to be there to, as you should, to celebrate with them during the victories. My mom had a couple of really great things happen for her. Every time although she was in and out of the hospital, when she got discharged, that was a victory. My dad has, yes, he may not be able to move, but his left side of his body, but there were times where we had major victories in his mobility on the right side, or aspects to him being able to enjoy his life when so much has been taken away. And we're expected to celebrate, and you should. However, the thing that people don't really talk about is that can be really hard to do when you're hurting. And when you're watching someone who used to be one way, and you see who they are now, and you want to celebrate with them and be happy with them, it is really, really hard. It is a major mind battle. It's very hard. And no one talks about that, but it is. It's so hard. And so you celebrate with someone in these victories, despite you seeing how much of a loss there is still too. But then also you're meant to be there to comfort them in the valleys. And so that is really, really hard when you are hurting or trying to manage your own grief, and then to still have something to give, to be a support system for those people who really need it. Such as my mom passed away, and then being there for my father in such a hard time, and helping him manage his grief while also managing mine. And having the support system of my family and friends is so important. But as a caregiver, you're expected to give. So this is going to end this first video, but I want you to hear that the main takeaway here is not to amplify the negative aspects of it, but rather to bring to light these challenges that caregivers experience in an effort to help you extend your life as a caregiver. Because if we constantly push things underneath the rug and we don't talk about these challenges as caregivers, the more likely more caregivers are likely to die and not be advocating for their own health. You can become the healthiest version of yourself no matter what you encounter in your life. And that's another reason I love this book, because it's not loss, trauma, and decreasing your health. It's loss, trauma, and resilience. It's resilience for a reason. You can become stronger in the midst of these challenges, and I hope that's what this video is helping you do. If you have any questions or you want to hear more about any of those first 5 that I shared, please comment below and follow along. Hit subscribe. I'm going to be doing 2 more videos, so this will be a 3-part series. Take care.